Olá, Flávia, consegue me escutar? Flávio, consegue me escutar? Olá, Flávio, tudo bem? Consegue me escutar? Você está sem o microfone.
Sim, tudo bem, estou colocando. Tudo bem?
Tudo ótimo, eu sou aqui da equipe de apoio. Eu só queria te avisar que nós já estamos na live no YouTube.
Então, mas eu sou moderador da sessão.
Isso,
Tá,
tá?
tá bom.
Eu terei que ir para outras salas agora e eu queria saber se eu posso te passar o host. Assim você será o
Claro,
responsável
claro,
pela sessão.
claro, claro.
Ah, então sem problemas. É só para te explicar rapidamente, nós estamos numa reunião do Zoom. Eu já deixei gravando, já deixei live no YouTube, então você não precisa fazer nada,
Ok,
ok? Qualquer dúvida,
ok.
você pode contatar o Luiz ou a equipe do SEMEAD, que aí nós retornaremos para te ajudar. Mas por
Tudo
enquanto
bem,
parece que
tudo
está tudo
bem.
certo, ok? Então tá, vou te passar o host
Tudo bem,
agora.
obrigado.
Espero que vocês tenham uma ótima sessão, um ótimo Keynote.
Tá bom, obrigado.
Sem problema.
Professor Flávio Orno, boa tarde.
Bem, Guilherme?
Tudo bem, graças a Deus, e com você, professor?
Tudo certo. Tudo certo. Oi, Natália.
Olá, tudo bem?
Tudo bom?
Tudo jóia.
Tudo certo.
Oi, Guilherme, prazer em conhecê-lo.
Professora Natália, boa tarde, prazer conhecê-la. Eu não sabia que você era brasileira, professora. A despeito do nome, pensei que pudesse ser de algum país de língua espanhola. É um prazer conhecê-la.
Prazer
Não
conhecê-lo
a
também.
conhecia.
E por enquanto a gente está falando em português. Daqui a pouco tem que apertar a tecla sala.
Não tem. E eu vou dividir a minha tela, né? Durante a apresentação.
Temos mais 6 minutos ainda. Viu, Natália? Eu não sei se, eu vou fazer uma breve introdução, tá? Abertura, introdução. Eu fiz aqui umas anotações do seu currículo, se tiver alguma coisa faltando, ou você corrija, por favor, tá bom?
Tá
Eu peguei
certo,
aqui
obrigada.
o que você mandou, fiz um resumo, né?
Obrigada. E como é que estão as coisas aí?
Tudo bem, né? Estamos aqui, congressos virtuais. Pelo menos as coisas estão funcionando bem, né?
Sem dúvida.
Nessa nova configuração aqui, tá, né, Guilherme? Tá tudo, pelo menos por enquanto, tá tudo certo.
Hoje de manhã eu tive a experiência de ser debatedor e havia moderador na sala, claro, mas como debatedor a gente tem a função de host, tem compartilhamento de tela, disponibilidade de
Agora
áudio.
você viu como é bom isso, né?
Mas
Você
deu tudo
tá do outro
certo.
lado, né? Não, sei.
A única
Viu como é
gafe,
bom estar do outro lado?
a única gafe que eu cometi foi que a comunicação começaria às 8h30. E a coordenação pede que a gente abra a sala 15 minutos antes. Eu abri 15 para as 8, achando que o nosso horário era às 8. Aí deu 8h05, eu não tinha percebido que o horário era às 8h30. Eu falei, meu Deus, onde estão todos? Porque eu estava esperando às 8. Aí acabou entrando um rapaz que é o responsável da FE e da FIA pelas plataformas, e ele veio investigar por que a sala estava aberta com tanto tempo de antecedência assim.
Pois é.
E na verdade eu falei, não, foi só um descuido de agenda, mas um descuido pelo menos a anteriori, não a posteriori, o que é excelente.
Sem dúvida.
Mas do ponto de vista tecnológico as plataformas estão ótimas. Os nossos grupos de facilitadores aqui de gestão de pessoas, ninguém teve problema, todos os compartilhamentos de tela, áudios. O professor JM vai ficar, o professor João Maurício vai ficar felicíssimo. Não é, Ronaldo? Você que é o nosso representante do professor João Maurício na sala?
Eu não. Olá, gente, tudo bem? Olá, professor Flávio. Doutora Natalia, tudo bem?
Tudo bom, e você?
Tudo ótimo. Acabei de ver você na TV agora.
Legal.
Tá.
Então, já está sendo gravado, é isso, né? Cuidado aí. Só fala bem do pessoal, não vai falar mal de ninguém.
Na outra sessão, entrei um tempo antes, né? O pessoal tava conversando, aí fui falando um monte de coisa assim. Depois no final eu pensei, meu Deus, tava gravando tudo.
Pois é.
Tem muita bolsa a ser cortada no médio prazo.
Nossa, eu vou falar assim, ó, corta aquela parte inicial ali, pelo amor de Deus.
Eu não sei, bem, obviamente vai ser editado, né? Mas acho que realmente é uma coisa para a próxima se melhorar, né? Então, não iniciar a gravação a partir do momento correto, né?
Eu acho que eles deixaram assim para não ficar a responsabilidade na mão da pessoa.
Não, eu sei, mas corre esses riscos. Né?
Senão a gente esquece de disparar a gravação e aí também tem, tem a
claro,
perda. Mas nesse sentido, a gravação da sessão que eu debati acabou passando de 2 horas. Foi, foi
Então,
bizarro.
pois é, tem isso também.
Haja espaço na nuvem.
A conta do Zoom vai ficar cara aí pro professor João
Pois é.
Maurício.
Pois é.
Ah, não só tá gravando, como tá live também no Zoom.
Sim,
No Zoom
sim.
não, no YouTube.
No YouTube.
Vou deixar aqui a câmera.
E a conferência começou hoje, sabe?
A maior parte, sim. Ontem teve o consórcio doutoral, algumas atividades, pré-conferência, né? Mas, para valer, é hoje. As principais atividades é hoje. Here it's 1 o'clock, right? Let's begin. Good afternoon to everybody here. We are welcome Professor Natalia Vidal. She's about to present the keynote speaker session number 1, Sustainable Business Management. Before her presentation, I would like to share some information about Natalia's curriculum. She had her PhD and master from University of British Columbia in Vancouver, Canada, and now she works as associate professor of sustainable business management at Anderson School of Management, University of New Mexico, where she has been working since 2012. There she teaches the following courses: the ethical, political, and social environment of business, environmental sustainability and business, and business and society. She has some publications in journals like International Journals of Operation Production Management, Business and Society, Sustainability, Journal of Business Ethics, and so on. Again, Professor Natalia, would like to welcome to our session, keynote speaker session number 1 at SEMIADI this year. Please feel free to have your presentation. Then we can have some questions and some comments after that. Thank you very much again.
Thank you. Let me share my screen. Okay, can you all see it?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So, primeiramente, boa tarde a todos. Good afternoon. It's such a pleasure to be here today. And I would like to start by thanking the organizing team at SEMIAGI that was for the kind invitation for me to speak today. And also I would like to thank Professor Flavio for the kind introduction. So I was asked to talk about sustainable business management, and this is my primary area of research. But since this is a very broad topic, I decided to focus on a specific part of sustainable business management, which is business collective action for sustainability. So I started talking about studying sustainable business management because, in my view, to make sure that we actually have enough companies embedding sustainability, we would need to increase the adoption and diffusion of these practices, right? So the idea is that to become the norm, we need as many companies, many organizations adopting sustainable practices. So I started looking into diffusion of sustainable business management practices by considering corporate responsibility, corporate sustainability as an innovation that companies would learn about and then internalize it. Then I started looking into sustainable supply chains because the buyer-supplier relationship is one of the most powerful motivators to help companies adopt new practices. And although I'm still doing research in sustainable supply chains, but I started looking more and more into how groups of organizations, collectives of organizations, serve as learning environments for organizations to learn about sustainability from one another, from different stakeholders, and work together to solve a common problem, a common sustainability challenge. So hence today's topic of business collective action for sustainability. In a normal situation, I would like very much this to be more of a conversation than a one-sided presentation like I'm doing now. But as Professor Flavius said, we will be having a time for questions later on. If you have a really burning question, please feel free to include those in the chat. And I'll do my best to answer them throughout the presentation and mostly after. All right, so here we go. When we start talking, and it's not moving. So when we start talking about collective action, at least for me, what came first to mind was fighting for civil rights, right? So people working together, going on protests and looking into how can we work together to achieve a common goal, usually related to civil rights. When we transfer collective action to a business context, usually, traditionally, historically, companies have been working together mostly for political reasons. So for example, lobbying activities done through a trade association, right? To try to convince policymakers to act in a specific way. But there are many forms of collective action. And I'm gonna provide some examples of how collective action has been manifesting itself within the business community. So my first example, given how widespread the effects of this pandemic has been throughout our society, my first two examples will be related to the pandemic. So this article was published in Time magazine in May, earlier this year, telling stories about how small business throughout the United States are working together to overcome the challenges related to the pandemic. So they are promoting each other, they are sourcing mostly locally products and services to support their business community and their community as a whole. And they realize that by working together, they can accomplish more, right? Because they are combining resources, including their capacity for innovation, coming up with new solutions to these problems. And this is an example that talks mostly about small businesses in the United States. Now let's take a look at one example that applies to larger companies. So the World Business Council for Sustainable Development created, in response to the pandemic, a new project called Vital Supply Chain Project. And the idea behind this project is to minimize the risks of, due to the pandemic, to food supply chains. So they want to, through collective action, assess existing risks of food supply chains, resolve those issues to try to prevent a global food crisis. And they also in the process, not only identifying existing risks, they want also to identify current strengths, what is working in their supply chains, and making them even stronger so that it improves the resilience of these food supply chains. Well, let's take a look at another example. And I was just talking about this with Professor João Maurício in TV Semead. And this example, so earlier this year, a number of CEOs of the largest US companies came together to write a letter stating that shareholder value is no longer everything, according to the title of this article from the New York Times says. So the idea with this letter was to show different business stakeholders that focusing on shareholder or profit maximization is not necessarily the best approach anymore, right? It provides a signal that stakeholder capitalism is actually becoming more and more important. These CEOs and this letter was done through an organization they all belong to called Business Roundtable, which is an association of the CEOs of top American companies. And through these organizations, they want to promote a strong US economy and also help the general public through public policy. Now, this example was a little bit controversial, to say the least. Right? There were a lot of people saying that this was purely a PR exercise, a public relations exercise. And that these companies, a lot of them are not really very good corporate citizens, right? They have a lot to do in terms of corporate responsibility and sustainability. It might be true. I think there was a big part of public relations in this initiative. My view, though, I'm a firm believer that changing narrative can lead to changing behaviors eventually, right? So by saying that shareholder value is no longer necessarily our only priority, we'll eventually change the conversation around this topic, leading further to changing behavior in this direction. So let's take a look at another example. All of these examples I provided so far, they are mostly they are related to sustainability and corporate responsibility, but this one is very much at the center of discussion of sustainability for business. So business collective action usually takes place through organizations that convene and collect the activities of different organizations, right, representing its member and helping its members achieve a certain goal related to sustainability. So the Prince of Wales Corporate Leaders Group, for example, is an organization that has a membership of some of the largest companies in Europe, including Unilever, Tesco, Coca-Cola, and these organizations were working together through the Corporate Leaders Group to talk to government leaders, policymakers, to change the dialogue and action regarding climate change. This group also helped its member companies change its practices and improve its practices to towards climate change mitigation, right? But they also want to work together to change government action on this topic. Similarly, a number of other organizations have been doing similar activities, they've been engaging in similar activities. Some of these organizations are global in scope, representing companies from multiple sectors. Some are very specific to one sector in one country, and they have a number of different ways of targeting the same problem. So why collective action, right? So far I gave you a number of examples, but why do I think it's so important to study this topic, to pay attention to this topic? Well, first of all, sustainability is made of great challenges. And when I say great challenges, I'm talking about the greatest challenges humanity faces right now. And it's not one grand challenge that defines sustainability, it's a network of them. We're talking about climate change, poverty, respect for human rights, widespread environmental degradation. All of these grand challenges are interrelated, they're overlapping, they influence each other. So to tackle such complex and large challenges, we need collective action. It's not only one country, one person, one organization will be able to address these challenges. We need collective action. We need collaboration. We need as many people as possible addressing these issues. And for that, we need systems thinking, the idea that everything is interrelated. And we are seeing more and more organizations becoming interdependent. And because of this interdependence among organizations, different ecosystems, people, societies, we're seeing, we're dealing with what many scholars call wicked problems. These are problems that are poorly defined. They are contentious, ambiguous in many ways, and they involved a large number of stakeholders and are difficult to solve, right? These wicked problems come from the grand challenges that are natural to sustainability. So therefore, this is the importance of collective action, working together towards a goal that is too large, too big for just one organization, one country, one person to solve. And the United Nations even recognized that in its Sustainable Development Goals, goal number 17 in the SDGs talks about the importance of partnership at different levels, at the local, regional, national, global levels to address sustainability, to achieve sustainability goals. And then there's also the sheer potential of these organizations that deal with business collective action for sustainability. Looking at the World Business Council for Sustainable Development again, this is an organization of CEO of international large company CEOs, and of approximately around 200, they have about 200 members, and they have an approximate number of 70 national business chapters, including the United States. Brazil also has one. And this membership represents companies in several different industry sectors and a combined revenue of about 8.5 trillion US dollars and 19 million employees. So, and this is one organization. Imagine, and as I'm going to show, there's been a huge number of organizations that are now being created and are functioning to address sustainability issues in the private sector. So in 2013, David Grayson and Jane Nelson published a book called Corporate Responsibility Coalition. And they looked into a number of these organizations that promote collective action for sustainability. And they traced the historical increase in number of these organizations. So this map shows the number of countries that had at least one business collective action organization for sustainability in 1990. This is by 2000, and then by 2013. These organizations have been increasing in number exponentially over the years. And as I'm going to argue throughout my presentation, they can have a huge impact if they do their job right? So, and then comes the question of, we're talking about business collective action and what would be the benefits of business collective action for society in general, for the natural environment. But what is the benefits of these initiatives for business, right? So, because when business join collective action, there's usually a cost. They have to pay membership fees to these organizations. They need to let go of some resources, mostly in the time that some of its employees, especially top management, participates in the activities of these organizations. So some of the benefits of joining collective action are, first of all, being able to achieve a goal that if they decided to do it individually, it would be a lot harder, right? So by pooling those resources to achieving a common goal, organizations might can achieve much more than they would if they worked alone. And then there is lots of evidence already that participation in collective action can improve not only individual reputation of companies, but also the collective reputation of an entire sector, an entire group of organizations. And lastly, as my co-author Harry Van Buren and I argue in a chapter we published this year, it helps companies improve their sustainability issues management capability, right? Identifying the issue and solving the issue, having better options for how to address sustainability issues. So far I gave you examples. I talk about why I think it's important, but what do I mean by business collective action, right? So this is the definition I use. This is action taken by a group of business organizations with the goal of addressing one or more sustainability issues. And to define sustainability issues, we consider them to be complex, multi-layered, social political issues related to one or more dimensions of sustainability. All right. Business collective action usually takes place through meta organizations, right? That concentrate all the efforts and organize all the ideas around an issue. And a meta organization is pretty much an umbrella organization, right? It's an organization whose members themselves are other organizations. And there is a number of different types of meta organizations, as I'm going to be talking about in a few minutes. These meta organizations might be created with only business members. They can be created in conjunction with other groups in society, such as non-governmental organizations, even government agencies, to address common issues. So what does it look like, business collective action for sustainability? There has been, like I said, there's a number of different ways these organizations can be organized, right? And there are so many now. There are over 120 business collective action organizations throughout the world, at least dealing with sustainability in the business sector. Some scholars have attempted to organize this field and figure it out how, who are they? What is their main motivation? So I'm gonna go over some of those right now. Sandra Wadek published a paper in the Academy of Management Perspectives in 2008. And she organizes business collective action for sustainability according to the three different sectors in our society: the business sector, the civil society sector, and the public sector. So she includes organizations in the market and business institution, those includes business membership associations, trade associations, and industry-specific initiatives. In the civil society, we have multi-stakeholder initiatives, watchdogs and activists, ratings and rankings. And in the state or government institutions, she talks about the initiatives such as the Kyoto Protocol, the Sarbanes-Oxley Act here in the United States, or the Socially Responsible Investment Regulation in the United Kingdom. In their book, Grayson and Nelson, they call these business collective action organizations, meta organizations, corporate responsibility coalitions. And they pretty much divide them into three main categories: trade associations that do have some initiatives related to sustainability, business-to-business membership associations, and multi-stakeholder initiatives. So in 2017, Heloise Berkowitz and her colleagues published a paper in the Journal of Business Ethics where they classify these organizations into two main groups: sector-specific, which is about what sectors do these meta organizations represent. So it can be a cross-sectoral representing multiple unrelated industries, a super-sectoral which represent a specific industry, but organizations, different types of organizations. Sector, which is organizations from one industry sector, and then infra-sector, which would be more of an issue-specific meta organization within a specific industry sector. And then they talk about stakeholder diversity as another dimension to classify these business collective action organizations. They talk about meta organizations that have traditional stakeholders, those that are more issue specific, those that are business only, right? The only organization that participate are business, and multi-stakeholder initiatives. And then this is the approach that Harry and I took for our chapter. We used initially the classification by Grayson and Nelson, dividing these organizations into 3 groups, so business group coalitions or business-to-business membership associations, trade associations, and multi-stakeholder initiatives. And we differentiated them based on based on their approaches to sustainability issues management, whether they provide partial issues management to their members, and the nature of issue responses that they propose to their members. And I'm not going to go into detail into this one, but if you do have more questions about our classification, let me know. I'd be glad to answer more questions later. So I would like now to go into a little bit more detail about the different ways these meta organizations are organized. Right, so I'm going to be talking about multi-stakeholder initiatives, trade associations, business-to-business membership associations, and social evaluations. Let's start by multi-stakeholder initiatives. These are perhaps the most studied form of business collective action in the management literature. So multi-stakeholder initiatives are private governance mechanisms involving a large number of stakeholder groups, including corporations, civil society organizations, sometimes governments, academia, or unions, to deal with social and environmental challenges across different industries and on a global scale. So there, usually when we're talking about multi-stakeholder initiatives, I get, there's some confusion about cross-sector collaborations. Are they cross-sector collaborations or are they multi-stakeholder initiatives? What is the difference? What are the similarities? So let's distinguish a little bit more about them. Usually, these partnerships, these initiatives can be a collaboration mostly among these 4 groups: business, government, community, and non-governmental organizations. When we have a partnership between governments and business, we have a public-private partnership. When it's between business and non-governmental organizations, we have a business NGO partnership. When it's between non-governmental organizations and communities, we have a sustainable local enterprise network. And when it's between governments and community, we have a community planning partnership. Multi-stakeholder initiatives happen when at least 3 or more of these groups work together towards a common goal. Here are some examples of multi-stakeholder initiatives. The Marine Stewardship Council was created with the goal of addressing sustainability issues related to the fisheries industry, right? To protect oceans and protect our current and future supplies of seafood. They created a certification standard, and this certification standard was developed as a joint effort between a large number of stakeholder groups. So we're talking about the industry, of course, industry representatives, governments, NGOs, academics, to come together to figure it out what it means to be sustainable when you are extracting resources from the ocean. The Accord on Fire and Building Safety in Bangladesh is another example. This MSI was created after the Rana Plaza incident in 2013 that killed so many people. And this brings together a number of stakeholders, including, of course, the business community, to prevent that type of accident from happening again and tightening the standards. The certified sustainable palm oil, the roundtable on sustainable palm oil, is another example of multi-stakeholder initiative. This is more specific to, this would be a super sector according to Berkowitz's classification, right? It regards, it's about an entire supply chain of companies that somehow are involved in using palm oil. And they again created a standard for certification purposes. The Global Reporting Initiative is another multi-stakeholder initiative combining the efforts of a number of stakeholder groups to create guidelines for sustainability reporting. And then we have the Sustainable Apparel Coalition, which is, again, specific to one industry sector, but that created a number of standards that need to be followed to guarantee sustainability in this sector. Now let's talk about business-to-business membership associations. These are perhaps the least studied groups of business collective action MAD organizations, right? These are MAD organizations created and managed by business and for business with the purpose of helping member firms address a broad range of sustainability issues. This is one of the areas I'm focusing most right now because for a number of reasons that I'm not going to go into detail right now, it is a fascinating area to look into. Here we have a number of examples as well. Instituto Etos in Brazil, Canadian Business for Social Responsibility, Business for Social Responsibility here in the United States, Fórum Empresa, that represents it's a Latin American initiative of the private sector for corporate responsibility and sustainability. The World Business Council for Sustainable Development and the Prince of Wales corporate leader groups are some of the examples. And trade associations, right? Trade associations, a lot of people get confused about why are they related to sustainability? They're not initially. Historically, trade associations were created to represent members' interests regarding specific issues. Most of these issues were more connected to politics, right? Policies. Right now, because sustainability is becoming an issue that is more and more important to a large number of sectors, trade associations are now picking up some of these issues and working with them, with their member companies towards those sustainability challenges. Mostly, in my perspective, activities related to trade associations are more about reputation management. They are more buffering than actually substantive activities. They don't lead to a lot of behavioral change. So trade associations, they are organizations created to represent business interests within specific domains, mobilizing firms within their domain so that collective action can be taken on common problems. Examples of trade associations that have been using sustainability, making some progress towards sustainability, are the Forest Products Association of Canada has identified certain sustainability issues as very important to the industry and requires these companies within their membership to get some form of forest certification. And forest certification usually verify whether or not certain forestry practices are sustainable, right? The American Chemistry Council, created in 1998 or 84, the Responsible Care Program, which is a program that was created to improve the reputation of the sector, improve its sustainability performance, right? And now participation in the Responsible Care Program is a membership requirement for companies that want to be part of the American Chemistry Council. And finally, we have social evaluations, which are fancy name for certification standards in general, right? So these are external evaluations made by institutional actors that have legitimacy with a number of different stakeholder groups to formally acknowledge that an organization meets a particular standard or a set of criteria. Of course, the boundaries between all these classifications of meta organizations is a little bit blurry. They're artificial boundaries, more for us to organize what we know about these organizations, but there's a lot of overlap. And many times, multi-stakeholder initiatives, they end up being also examples of social evaluations that are business collective action for sustainability through some form of certification. But what the main example I would like to give you on social evaluations as a form of collective action, business collective action for sustainability, is the B Corp movement. B Corps, certified B corporations are companies that decide to voluntarily undergo a certification program. And this certification usually measures their performance in 5 areas: governance, workers, communities, environment, and customers. And the idea, and this certification standards were created by an organization called B Lab, right? And the idea behind the certification is to make sure that companies are reducing their negative impact on these 5 areas, increasing their positive impact in these 5 areas, and overall being a source for good in society, right? And my example and my experience with B Corps, we're currently collecting data with the B Corp community here in New Mexico for a project. And this is an amazing community of organizations. They are really concerned about sustainability and corporate responsibility, and they want to go above and beyond in working with their suppliers, with their community, with their employees to not only implement the sustainable practices within their own organizations, but extend it to other stakeholders around them. So they actually end up serving as a way to diffuse sustainable business practices to other organizations around them that exist in their communities or that they are in relationship with through a buyer-supplier relationship. So according to the Lab, we currently have a little bit over 3,600 B Corp certified companies globally, representing 150 different industry sectors in 74 countries. Brazil has about a little bit over 200 B Corps, representing a large number of industry sectors. Well, now comes the question of, do they work, right? I talked about the potential of these meta organizations that organize business collective action for sustainability. But how effective are they? Because if they're not effective, then what is their purpose, right? It's just, again, a public relations exercise. So this is a controversial and a very difficult topic of research, measuring their effectiveness. So how do we define success? How do we define what is actually good in terms of effective in terms of performance of these meta organizations? Barbara Gray, Jill Purdy, and Ann Skolk, they talk about what is success for multi-stakeholder initiatives. They say that most research nowadays measure outputs and outcomes. So immediate outputs, immediate actions taken as a result of a multi-stakeholder partnership or initiative. Or outcomes, which are general outcomes, which are immediate changes in behavior of organizations that are participating in those initiatives. But they say that we should really be measuring is not outcomes and outputs, that we should be measuring broader impact. And they define that by as reductions or improvements in the problem the initiative set out to address. If we don't, so we're talking about climate change. Are we actually making a difference? And this is extremely challenging to measure because many times it will take a while, because when we're talking about systems, there is usually a delay between an action and outcome, right? So, like I said, this is their discussion on multi-stakeholder initiatives, which are different from business-to-business membership associations like Grayson and Nelson talk about. They, according to Grayson and Nelson, one of these organizations are being effective when they are raising awareness, right? These are different levels of effectiveness. Raising awareness of sustainability issues among different organizations, in helping their member companies embed sustainability practices in what they do every day. And then whether or not these meta organizations are able to scale practices, to diffuse these practices as much as possible to as many companies as possible. But still, they are talking about systemic transformation, right? According to them, success is seeing as many organizations out there as possible implementing these practices and becoming more sustainable, because they think that will lead to a transformation, a society-wide transformation. So let's talk about future research. What do we do from here? This is a very new field, relatively new field of research. There is some research on multi-stakeholder initiatives and trade associations in general, but still there's so much we still don't know about it. I will talk about 3 of these because I think they will probably serve as a good foundation for this field to move forward. So we have, I think first we need to understand the inner workings of each of these meta organizations. How do they decide which sustainability issues are the most important ones for them to promote to their member companies? What are their processes? What are the structure that the different types of structures that they have, and how they influence their ability to promote sustainability to different member companies? Then I think we need to compare and contrast. There are so many different, sometimes subtle, sometimes not so subtle, among these different types of meta organizations for business collective action, for sustainability. And we are just starting to understand that it's not an entire homogeneous group, right? There are many different types of organizations, many different types of goals and procedures that they use to achieve a sustainability related goal. So I think we need to understand a little bit more, how are they different, how are they similar, and ask questions, for example, of how would, can a multi-stakeholder initiative and a business-to-business membership association collaborate temporarily to achieve a common goal, and how would that work, right? But I think the major part of research that we still need to investigate is impact. We still don't know what is the exact impact, how much do these organizations actually affect, if any, change in the business community and globally, more widely in society. And many of these organizations are very, very cautious about providing information about how they measure performance. And so, and this is, I see as a major challenge in this area, figuring out how to measure real impact. Are we solving the problems that we set out to solve, right? These are, like I said, just 3 areas that I would like to see more research in. There are many other topics that can be considered here as well, and I would like very much to hear your perspective on what you think would be good future research topics. But I think these 3, they kind of will help us set up a stronger foundation for this area. So in conclusion, the main messages I wanted to pass to you today are, first of all, to have sustainable business, to have a sustainable community, a sustainable society, we need collective action, right? Business need to work together with one another and different stakeholders to be able to make any difference related to sustainability challenges. In addition, there are many, many forms of business collective action for sustainability. And we need to understand them better, to understand what is work, what is not work, and how can we move forward, right? And finally, there are a number of different pathways forward. What are the different areas that can be studied? And how can we move this area of research to a different level, right? So this concludes my presentation. My goal here was today to present a general overview of this area to you and hopefully inspire at least some of you to take a better look at this area, to start doing research in this area if you haven't already. And please ask questions. I would like very much to hear from you. Ask questions, make comments and suggestions. And I would like to thank you very much again for the opportunity to present today. Thank you. Obrigada.
Thank you, Natalia, for the presentation. Excellent. So far, we have two questions here. The first one is from Fabricio. I think she wrote his question before you talk about this topic about the benefits, the business benefit from the collective actions. You talked, if you're not wrong, you talked about the efficiency, the reputation, and tackling sustainability issues, something like that. Do you want to add something about the business benefits for the companies?
Okay. So you let me see if I understand the question correctly. You want me to explain a little bit more what are the business benefits of joining these meta organizations?
Yes. He asks, how can the business benefit from this interrelationship, the collective actions?
Okay. So, like I said, I think that the main benefit here for a number of companies is the ability to combine their resources and think creatively and learn from one another. A number of these meta organizations, they provide opportunities for companies to interact with one another through conferences, workshops, task forces, or specific groups that work in a specific area. So these provide very important learning opportunities that they would have difficulty to get that knowledge from somewhere else, right? So they're learning from leaders in their sectors, they're learning from their competitors, and it's a very effective way. In terms of reputation, there is a lot of evidence already that by participating in a group that in one of these groups that has a good reputation for sustainability will signal to stakeholders that yes, we have a better reputation. We are above average, right? We're better than the companies that do not participate in this coalition. And as a group, if they work together to improve their individual sustainability performance, it will reflect well in the entire group. So individual and collective reputations are better addressed, improved through participation in these groups. And like I said, helps them manage sustainability issues. So these companies, they have a number of sustainability issues that they are faced with, and they could go alone most of the time. They could figure it out by themselves. But by participating in these organizations, these organizations provide an assessment. They do part of the issue management process for them, right? They identify the issues, they evaluate the issues, and they propose responses that organizations can then more automatically implement and adapt to their own context.
Thank you. The second question is from Ronaldo. He asks if it's possible to consider stakeholder engagement practices of companies as business collective actions. Please, if you have other questions, please write down, please.
Okay, that's a great question. Most of the time, to engage in sustainability, to do something related to sustainability, you need to engage with stakeholders, right? In itself, just engaging in stakeholder dialogue not necessarily can be defined as business collective action. But when you combine different organizations in dialoguing, conversing with different stakeholder groups, then yes, then it's business collective action, right?
Okay, thanks. If you want, audience, if you want to write the questions in Portuguese, there's no problem, you can translate, okay? I have one of my questions here.
Okay.
Really, I would like to play the devil's advocate, something like
means.
that. Do you think it's possible that the collective actions can be a way for the companies and organizations in general to practice a higher level of greenwashing?
Absolutely. Oh, yes. And I see a lot of that. I mean, there are a number of examples, right? But then, in response to that, I think a larger number of meta organizations, of these organizations for business collective action, they are implementing sanctions, right? So if a company that is a member behaves poorly in regards to sustainability, they will probably lose membership status, right? Because once these companies misbehave and they bring the reputation of the entire organization, the entire group of companies down with them, right? So I'm seeing more and more these meta organizations increasing the amount of sanctions they implement to prevent that. And then there's another side to your question, which is there are examples too of business collective action against sustainability, right? Here in the United States, especially the oil and gas company industry, for example, is a great example of companies that are working against sustainability. So yes, that is an interesting area of research as well.
Any other questions? Any other questions? Well, another one from Samuel. My question is more focused on disclosure of organizational sustainability. The IFRS Foundation recently opened a public consultation asking whether the organization should create its own sustainability standard. Do you think this new standard, if come true, could change the company's engagement with sustainability practice? It's about disclosure. Okay.
Yeah. So let me see. What is the IFRS Foundation?
It's an organization
accounting. Okay.
About accounting. Yes, accounting standards. Yes, SASB and others. And this accounting area.
So that's another interesting question because there's a lot of debate about certification and how effective they are, right? With certification is good to bring the bar, to raise the bar for an entire group of companies. And so that's excellent because it brings everybody to a minimum level of sustainability performance. But on the other hand, there is already some evidence that shows that once companies adopt certification, they stop innovating and changing and improving on those specific areas. So yes, I think it can improve. It can become, certification can set the rules for a new normal, right? A new minimum requirement. But at the same time, companies that become certified, they need to be careful not to stop, to stagnate, right? They need to continue to improve their practices. And because the issues they're dealing with, they are not static issues, they are in constant flux. They're always changing, always modifying. So yes, the initial response, yes, they can, but they should not stop there.
Yes, sure. We have another question from Fabricio. He asks about the discourse narrative of companies. If let me see, how can we analyze and assess whether companies are only reinforcing the sustainable narrative, or are they in fact being the differential of the current against capitalistic logic. He mentions the fallacy of storytelling, for example.
Oh, yes. So narrative is an interesting thing. A lot of people think that it's narrative doesn't really serve any purpose beyond publicity, public relations, and show a better facade, when behind the scenes you're still the old same organization that doesn't really make any changes. I do believe narrative will bring changes eventually to behavior. That said, it's a long-term change. It's not something that will be achieved overnight in a few years. It's just a change in the pattern of the conversation, in the topics that are more emphasized by leaders in different sectors. And that conversation will change, will raise people's attention, some red flags to issues that before were completely ignored, right? So yes, I think that narrative can eventually lead to better behavior in this area.
Thanks. Thank you, Fabrice, for your question. I have one, if I may, about a possible polarization. We see we can see, unfortunately, or I don't know, we can see polarization in several areas, several dimensions in society, and sometimes we can. Personally, I have noticed that there's some actions or movements in a polarization, creating possible polarization between this, what Fabrizio talked about, the capitalist logic, and the stakeholder, or the sustainable, or something, our logic, right? Do you think it's possible this polarization increases? Because we are talking about collective actions and collective solutions, of course. If there is a polarization, probably we can't reach the solutions.
I think that's an excellent question, something that I haven't explored in much detail, really. But yes, we already see, right, a group of companies that is a firm believer that sustainability is important, and a firm of company that still holds strong to the traditional way, which is money before anything else. I think eventually, at least this is my hope, the collective action for sustainability will eventually pull more and more companies that are on the profit-only side, right? So this is my hope. I really haven't seen any evidence of this happening yet, but that would be, again, an interesting topic of future research.
Because sometimes I feel like we are preaching to the converted, but we need to convert.
That is very true. Yeah, that is very true.
Okay, I think everybody in this, probably everybody in this room are converted, but what about the others?
True. And just to comment on that, that's where I think narrative, for example, or certification is important, because even though they are very tiny changes compared to what we need, they are the beginning, right? They're pushing people through a threshold to a different perspective, a different view of society that hopefully will lead to more changes later on. But yeah, a lot of the times we are preaching to the converted, so it's another huge challenge.
Any other questions? I have a final one from my. What do you think about this ESG fashion or ESG movement? Everybody's talking about ESG, but as academics, we should have caution about this discussion, this movement. What do you think about?
Yeah. So you're talking about ESG standards, or these ratings and rankings, or?
No, because in ESG in general, in media, everybody's talking about ESGs in general, and sometimes they even don't know what this means or how to deal with that.
Yeah, I know. I think there's these new acronyms, these new terms that usually come up to describe some effort in sustainability. These are just labels. I think what we need is to be careful about the labels that we use, because many in the general public don't fully understand what they mean. So if we are able to create terms that better explain the concept itself in an appealing way, I think we have a better chance of educating the public also of the importance of these measures, right? For companies, it becomes a jargon, right? It becomes common language that sometimes it loses its meaning because people don't fully understand the concept behind it. So it will change, right? We have different different labels coming up all the time, mostly to talk about the same thing in different ways. But yeah, it's frustrating sometimes.
We have the comment about Luciana's comment. ESG investment funds are on the rise. Hence the discussion. That's exactly what I was talking about. That's why it's important to understand and to check if it's real or if again only a narrative or only a fashion, right?
Yeah, and that was one of the frustrating parts as a researcher in this looking at ESGs is that it seems like when you refer to ESGs, you're referring to the same thing all over, cross board, right? And then when you look into different ratings and rankings, what you see is that they measure sustainability sometimes in very different ways, right? So sometimes we end up comparing oranges and apples when in fact we should be only talking about oranges or apples, right? So it's another frustrating aspect of this research.
Actually, it emphasizes our role as academia to have the correct conceptualization, correct measurement, as you said, about measurement, impact measurement. Otherwise, we don't know if they are oranges or apples, right? Any other comments? Any other questions?
I see that Luciana posted another question under her comment, asking if
about ESGs.
Yes, if we're taking advantage, if there is really a promising vision in this. Like I said, I go back to my argument of it's a starting point, right? It's not ideal, it's far from ideal, but we have to start somewhere. And wherever we start, until we get closer to our ideal vision in terms of measuring sustainability, we're gonna have to deal with imperfections, right? But we need to start somewhere. Simply doing nothing because it's not close to perfect, it's also not acceptable. So we need to keep working on perfecting and making it closer to what we really need as we go, but we cannot just not do anything. So they do play an important role right now, all these ESG rankings and ratings, but yeah, it's we have to keep going and have to keep working.
Another question for Fabricio, again, if possible, could talk about what it's like to teach about these things, very interesting. Teach about these things of social responsible business, stakeholders orientation, so on. Here in Brazil, it's still difficult to discuss about this, especially to say that's more than essential, and it's not something that should be only on the agenda of large companies and classrooms. About teaching these subjects.
Yeah, that's a great question, Fabricio. It's not easy. I've been teaching business and society for about 10 years now, and I like it. It's a topic that I have a passion about, and I use that to talk to my students about ethics, about corporate responsibility, about sustainability, environmental management. but it's contentious. Right? There are some classes that I really need to get back home and drink an extra large glass of wine after some discussions. But it's also very rewarding in some ways, because I've had many students to come to me after a semester and said, hey, I started your course because I needed to be here. It's a required course, but I actually learned a lot. Thank you. And then there are those students that during the last class of the semester, they turn to me and say, I'm sorry, I still think that profit's more important than anything. There's nothing I can do about it, right? I did my job as well as I could, but it's not a religion. I'm not trying to convert people. I'm not preaching, right? I need still to respect their views. What I can do is show the evidence of that really, that this is really worth it, not only because you can be a more successful business if you are more responsible, more sustainable, but also because it's the right thing to do, right? So it's frustrating sometimes. Most of the time it's rewarding. I think if you really enjoy what you do, what you teach, that will show in your work, and it will help your students become more passionate about this topic too.
Thanks. Yeah, it's a challenge. Another question from Ronaldo. He is asking if you have some indication of some other readings other than yours, your article you mentioned on the topic.
Yes, I can send some suggestions of readings in this area. There are some, like for example, the book from David Grayson and Jane Nelson is really interesting, and there are a number of others that have been published recently, including articles. So I can send that perhaps directly to Ronaldo. Is there a place where I can put some suggestions for resources in this area?
Excellent, thanks. If there's any other question? No? We have some minutes. If you do you have some final message for the audience?
That's first of all, thank you all for being here. It's really a pleasure to be able to engage with the Brazilian scholarly community again. I've been abroad for 20 years, and I always think that Brazil produces such creative, innovative work. So it's really a pleasure to be here talking to you today. But most of all is, if you're here, you probably have an interest in sustainability and corporate responsibility, right? And don't give up. Keep working on that area that is closer to your heart, and because that will make your work more innovative, more important, right? And if you do want to talk more about business collective action for sustainability or any other topic related to sustainable business management, let me know. I would very much like to engage in more dialogue with all of you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Natalia, again. Excellent presentation, excellent discussions here. Thank you all the audience for the questions, for your presence here. And we have more sessions, more discussions, more presentations in the seminar. I hope that you see everybody there. Thank you very much. See you later. Thank you.
Thank you.